Hello Aqua friends, today we are going to do this gorgeous winter wolf. I am starting with a snowy background. I decided to use neutral tint with a little bit of Prussian blue for the background, and I'm wetting the area really well. I'm using a 2-inch brush here and just getting it really nice and saturated. Picking up my 12 round Princeton velvet brush, I'm adding in more of the colors and just getting that down. While it's wet, you'll get this very nice soft effect. So for the snow part, I decided to use salt. It makes really lovely snow. So after that dried, there is lumps of snow, as you can see in the reference photo, on the wolf's face. And I need to paint that lump on his nose the same color as the background so that when you go to put the white on it, it has something to show up on. Starting off with the softest colors, working wet on wet, I have raw umber that I'm using on his face. Other colors that I used were burnt sienna and Van Dyke brown, as well as neutral tint. So wherever I'm seeing dark in the reference photo, I'm bringing in those dark tones on the wolf. So a lot of the top of his head has some very warm browns that I'm filling in. This is the burnt sienna. Around his ear on the top, there's a lot of darker browns. So I'm trying to work as quickly as I can because my paper's drying. I am losing the battle because I am getting blooms. So I have to keep wetting the paper, and when the blooms start happening, I have to just keep going around with more color to try to keep it wet. So there I go again with the very warm tones. And I know it's starting to look like a dog's breakfast, no pun intended. Well, it's not a dog, it's a wolf, but you know what I mean. Now this is the ugly stage, folks. Bear with me. Consider it the ugly stage. You have to get through the ugly stage. I know it's not looking hot yet, but just keep at it. Keep your paper wet. Keep putting on the colors to try to get your values where they need to be. Also considering that this is our first layer and it's going to dry much lighter. And I'm always painting in the direction that the fur goes. That is important too, to get a realistic and three-dimensional look. While it's wet, I'm putting in my Van Dyke brown and my very warm browns. Now with the second layer, I'm starting with the nose, just using some neutral tint there. Okay, smoothing out that muzzle area. Coming in with another coat of the raw umber. And a little bit of a reddish tinge around his mouth, adding a teeny bit of the quinacridone red to the burnt sienna. Another coat on his nose. Softening that out to the surrounding area. Getting the spots on his muzzle. And with a very fine tipped brush, this is a 4, but the tip is very fine. So I am using a watery mixture of the same colors I'm always using to get in some textures of the hair. Going over that nose again, getting that darker, and adding the details around the nose. All the areas that are the darkest, I'm going over that with the neutral tint. And with my number 4, putting in some more of the hair details. I'm not going too crazy with all the fine hairs because a lot of his face is covered in snow. More tiny hairs on the muzzle. And you just keep building up your colors like this until you get the correct tonal value you're looking for, which is hard to gauge in this reference photo because, like I said, his face is covered in snow. But for the snow to show up, you still have to have the tonal value underneath the snow, if that makes sense. All right, what's what attracted me to the reference photo is his lovely green eye. Darkening up the details that I need to on his face. And with the script liner brush, I'm adding in his whiskers. And all these little fine detailed hairs on his snout. Finally, working on the details of the eye, there are some very dark tones around his eye that I'm starting to fill in the hair. I'm always working in the direction the fur goes. Dry that a little bit so that I could add the pupil. And the pupil is kind of on the fuzzy side, and I'm trying to replicate that. So wetting the area with a little bit of that gray water, coming in, dropping in my dark gray. Now I'm taking Dr. Martin's, P.H. Martin's opaque white watercolor. I really like this white. It's very opaque. I think probably the best one I've used so far. And it's great for making the snow on his face. I'm using a mop brush and I'm getting in the lighter textures of the snow first. It's a little tedious having to go through and add all those soft marks all over the fur before I put the bigger chunks on. And as I did this, I wished I would have went a little bit darker on the fur on his forehead, but at this point, I didn't want to start messing around and making things look muddy, so I just left well enough alone. And it's good to change your brushes. I changed back to my black brush and putting really bigger globs on there to get all these different textures and tiny little spots with my brush, as well as flicking some on the background, and it completes the look. I hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial today, and I'll see you next week.